going out to eat, lifestyle, vacations, their kids, and then there's no way off. You can't not make, once you're making $500,000 a year and spending, whatever that is after taxes, you can't like not make that. But it's very hard for people to undo it.
You can't, you find yourself addicted to this stuff and it's never enough.
What's up, guys? This is Justin Khan back at you with another episode of The Quest. Today I'm here with my friend Eric Glyman, who is a serial entrepreneur and the co-founder and CEO of Ramp, which is a pretty revolutionary new credit card for companies that I'm a small, very tiny seed investor in. Eric, thanks for coming on board.
Justin, it's really good to see you. And no, thank you. I'm looking forward to today.
Thanks for doing the podcast. Yeah, maybe we could just start from the beginning. We've known each other for a long time, right? It's been, when did you do YC? In 2015?
Summer 2015.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Eric was in my group at YC in 2015, and he had a company called Paribus back then. Maybe you could give people a little bit of a backstory of how do you become an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Let's do it. So I'll give my quick life story. So I was born and raised in Las Vegas, lived there for 18 years. I didn't realize it at the time, but I think it left an impression. It just changed a lot. Like when I was born in 1990, there was 300,000 people. 18 years later, there was 2 million. And so I think I just grew up around places that changed a lot. And I didn't realize until later that was actually weird and unusual. It was good to see building. Went to school at East, economics and
Wow,
management.
that's a lot. Like what?
Yeah.
That's a lot of like change for what happened in Las Vegas that made it boom so much.
It's a crazy set of things. And I actually think in some ways it reminds me of what's happening now in certain startup scenes where why is it growing? Because it's growing. Because other people know it's growing. The city's growing, so it creates other industries. And so I think what started to happen, one, it's close to California, had a 0% state tax rate. So people started moving more and more. There was a lot of casinos being built. The conference industry was being figured out. And so um, what happened, people were building new construction sites. People moved there, so they needed more healthcare. Healthcare was being built and you needed to teach kids. So there was education being invested, there was finance. And there was sort of growing up, a lot of it was there would be new sections of town built all the time. And as a kid, that was really fun. You can sort of see new parts of town. When I went to college in Boston, it blew my mind to see like a 300-year-old building. I thought a really old and ancient building was like 30 years old. And so it messed with me in ways that I don't think I'd really understood until later of like, that was a weird childhood. But yeah, it was just normal for me to see like people build stuff. And that was kind of what people did. And so I took it for granted. That's not always the case in other cities. Yeah.
So it kind of gave you the added, I mean, there's a little bit of a founder mentality embedded in there. Like, we can do it and go build something.
I think so. And I guess you're getting into philosophy, waxing philosophical here already, but yeah, like even the founders of a lot of the major casinos and companies were people you knew their stories. Steve Wynn was more, different connections, but more self-made. Sheldon Adelson grew up poor in a 1-bedroom apartment in Dorchester, and I think he recently passed. But sort of these were people who, at that point were old and late in their careers, but these were self-made, and that was sort of the example in Las Vegas of people who did it and actually founded the company. And so, yeah, the default of big companies were built by people, and you could see them living and breathing and walking around was something you just grew up with. And yeah, it was a cool city. What else? I went to East, studied economics and Mandarin. This was like 2008. The World's Fair was, the Olympics just happened. The World's Fair was coming up, and so I lived there for a couple of years. I thought there was a moment in time I actually thought I was going to go and start my life out there. And after being there for a few years, I just remember thinking and feeling, there's a billion people here who speak perfect native Mandarin, tens of millions who speak great English too. What makes me so special Uh, yeah. And I felt, if I was starting something, I should pick up a hard skill. And so I actually ended up in a different path than I thought I would. In some ways, different than most entrepreneurs started. I ended up moving to New York in finance, was traditional, but I worked in bankruptcy specifically in restructuring. And a lot of my learning was like, all right, what has to be true for businesses to like not go bankrupt. So that was helpful, I guess later, but also a lot of the job was like, there are these companies are sort of becoming train wrecks, but there actually might actually be really good parts of these companies. Or if you change things about it, you could actually help companies start again. And a lot of the skill set was, could you figure things like value, find value that other people had overlooked. And that sort of led into Paribus, and sort of the last decade of what I've been working on in a career. But um, yeah,
How did you how did you even know you wanted to start a startup? You're working in bankruptcies and finance in New York. And then like, what did, how did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
well, I think in some ways it actually almost even meshes with the upbringing, which was like normal life for me. And Las Vegas was like, you things get built and you build good stuff, and it creates value for people. It's fun, it's exciting, it's things that literally didn't exist go up and you can walk inside it, you can see it. I moved to Beijing. I lived there for almost 2 years, and it was like Las Vegas on steroids. Like I remember there was one time I was there for the spring. I went back in the fall, and I couldn't find my old apartment because they actually had rerouted traffic completely, built buildings around it, and just the pace was it was like that on steroids. And then I went to go work in bankruptcy, and things just moved slow. Like you would try to figure out a couple years in advance, like what were the companies that were about to fall into a train wreck. Sometimes it'd be right, other times it'd be off. And a lot of it was changes, optimizations on something, but it didn't really feel like creation. And I don't know, I just felt like it was intellectually interesting. And probably if there's any people listening to this who worked in finance, it's a really attractive and smart industry. We can get, as when I was graduating college, it was like the thing to do. You get paid a lot. Um, but you would talk to people who were a couple years older, and they're like, I have golden handcuffs. I This is not the most stimulating thing that I'm doing, but I now am addicted to this lifestyle. I have an expensive apartment. I've got a nice watch, nice things. Maybe they have kids, and I can't leave. I'm excited about the next promotion, and I'll make the 100,000, 250, 500, a million, like, and I think you just find these people who are like, I can't get out, and I sort of felt like I was falling into this thing. I didn't love it, and
You were on the
I'm
road.
on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to get off. It,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that. There's so many people who are, friends of ours, I'm sure, like friends of mine from college who like went down that path. And then you basically you spend whatever you make, right? Like they're making $500,000 a year, $1 million a year, and they're spending that on, their mortgage, big apartment, big house, going out to eat, lifestyle, vacations, their kids. And then there's no way off. You can't not make, once you're making $500,000 a year and spending, whatever that is after taxes, you can't like not make that. So
It's
it's very hard for people to undo it.
you can't. You find yourself addicted to this stuff, and it's never enough. Um, and I Look, there are some people who work in these industries who truly genuinely love it. It is their calling, and like that's amazing for them. But I think that the pay is so high in a lot of industries. You sort of surrounded by people who don't really love what they're doing, and they know it, and you know it. And I just remember being 23, 24, and being like, I am about to be in this for my entire life unless I do something. And so there's that going on, combined with, this was back 2013, 14, 15. Startups were not the cool thing to do, but uh, people that I loved reading about, I loved hearing about companies that were getting created, different startups, founders who built amazing companies. And there was definitely little tells, but in my free time, that's what I was thinking about and wanted to be doing. And so I kind of knew. wasn't doing the right thing. And I think I did what a lot of people do commonly. I think when they want to become a founder, which is like you try to come up with ideas in the abstract, and they came up with like really bad business plans and bad ideas. I tried to be like, okay, what's the biggest industry, and um, where is a problem in this industry? And you propose these like fanciful businesses that like sound good on paper, but you couldn't really find a real customer. That didn't work for a while, but I got to be very close with my friend Kareem Atiyah. He's my co-founder at later became my co-founder of Paribus, then at Ramp today too, where we both were in the spot where we wanted something different. We first tried to come up with ideas in the abstract. That didn't work. Started reading about what does it take to come up with good ideas, started noticing a lot more, and at some point stumbled into, a problem, kept pulling at the thread, and eventually that became Paribus. And, look, I was on the treadmill in banking, but I had saved up enough. Our business plan was at the time um, user savings. We could quit. We'd get paid a bonus. We would have enough to work for 4.5 months if we moved to Brooklyn, and we could grow, beards too. They wouldn't let us do that in finance, and give it a shot. And so, yeah, that's there's more to it than that, but I'm really happy we kind of pulled the trigger and took the risk.
Yeah. So what was the idea behind Paribus and how did you come up with it?
Yeah. So the premise of that is anytime people are buying anything online in store, usually what you buy comes with promises and guarantees. So let's say you buy a TV at Best Buy and the price of that TV drops a few days after you buy it. Best Buy would guarantee a price adjustment. You could get the lower price and the price difference if you ask, or if your Amazon package is shipped to you later than what they promised. Amazon would, give you an extra month of Prime if you ask them. And so we built, pretty novel at the time. It was an email app. Basically, you'd sign up, link your email. That's all you had to do. And our software would scan for receipts, prices, guarantees. And if you were eligible for money back or a claim, Paribus automatically filed the claim. You got the difference, we charged a cut. Um, and we launched, I think in May of 2015, went through YC, and I think a lot of the advice you shared, and happy to share what that was, but really changed the trajectory of the company in our life. And within a year, we had 1 million customers just about. And a year later, in October 2016, got a life-changing offer from Capital One, the bank, to buy the company. And so it was a very fast progression, but it was sort of just very rapid excitement around let's use software to help people save and get more out of the things they're already buying. Was really what that startup was about.
Well, what was the advice that I gave you that changed your life? I'm so curious to hear it, but then also like you did such a good, your execution was so, it was kind of like the I dream scenario for a start, right? You started it like 3 years later or 2 years later, basically, you've sold it to Capital One and like have, are made as a startup founder, like what do you think you did right?
Um, so I'll tell you. So there's first, so we launched it in May of 2015. We came up with the idea in August of 2013. We incorporated the company in July of 2014. And there was a completely different speed and trajectory that happened between June of 2015 when we met. I think at the time, Paribus had on the order of 1,000 users, and October 2016. So it's like we actually had less time. Why was that period radically more productive and much higher growth? And there's two pieces that I'll always remember. One, I think when we first came into office hours with you and Jessica and Jeff, you'd asked like what our goals were for the summer, and I think that we'd said, well, we have 1,000, we want to have 100,000 users by the end of the summer, and like that, for context, like that's 100x growth in 2.5 months, pretty nuts. I think you were pretty nice to us, but I think one of the central advice you gave it also, I think is centered at YC is, okay, well, how about 10% this week? Like that's what we're looking for. What can you do this week? And a lot of the advice is like, all right, like you can do it. And what was powerful about it is it forced us to make trade-offs and drive constraints. I think one of the hardest things for first-time founders, and certainly for us at the time, was you know where you want to go, the end state vision, but there's 1,000 different choices you could make in getting there. Like if we wanted to, get add 100,000 users, we could maybe do some large press event. We could, door to door, ask people to sign up. We could do marketing. We could try to fundraise. We could do all this stuff. And often we found ourselves in these spirals. If there's so many things to do, I'm not sure what to do first. But if you drew the advice you gave of just grow 10% this week was, for us, it was like, all right, well, how do we add 100 users this week over the next 7 days? It drive constraint of the problems. You could trade off and say, okay, like, um, we have this method to go do this. We think it's 100% likelihood of success, and we'll do that. And it would get a little bit harder, but it actually forced us to drive constraints. And we never were about, adding 1,000, growing 100% over a period of months, or growing 10x, 100x over a period of time. From that point on, it was just a little bit of progress each and every week is enough. And that drove this compounding curve. So that was one, the driving constraints, and happy to dig in there. The other advice she gave was around acquisition. And I think it actually was very central to why I've been able to move so quick with Ramp and spend time there too. But it was more of around, we'd only done really one round for Paribus at the time. And so we had almost all of the company. In an acquisition like that, the company bought Capital One was buying the stock of the company. It was a great price. They wanted to put retention bonus on it. I think that the norm of a lot of people is to go and say, like, great, I want to take as much of it and maximize it. And I think that the advice that I think you push on is like, look, this is like a life-changing moment. Like, take care of the people around you. Be really generous and thoughtful with the team. And we ended up taking and dividing retention and earnouts, like really went out way beyond ownership representation to the team, and actually divvied a lot more out than what you normally do on paper. And not only was it like the right thing to do, and life changing, and I think great for everyone involved, but it built so much trust and credibility among the team. People were not just interested, but like craving, like, when can we work together again? The reputation got out, and I think that goodwill there and paying it forward and being thoughtful there meant that years later people trusted us in a very different way. So happy to spend time on either one, but there's two things very specifically that were pivotal for us.
That's amazing. And so after that, I remember visiting you in your startup office in Brooklyn. You had that apartment or whatever, where like
Yeah.
6 or 7 people were crammed in.
Yeah.
And you were working. So you grinded out there for a little bit. You sold the company at Capital One. Didn't stayed there a couple years maybe.
Yeah.
Is that
About
right? And then
2.5, almost 3 years.
yeah, and then decided to have another go at it and like started Ramp, right? Like, how did you decide what company you were going to start next, or even that you wanted to do another company?
So, couple things. This one. I think we knew, like, we were at the time when I sold, I was 26. I knew I didn't want to be a company man my whole life and going through, but I also felt like it's like these guys, Capital One, really put a lot of trust in us, and we wanted to do right. And so we wanted to make sure over the course of the first, you know, at least year and a half, we would make them feel like this was the best decision they had made and feel great. So we spent a lot of time trying to execute, grow, do all this stuff right. At some point when we started to get there, we're like, okay, I probably don't want to be here. This is interesting. I want to move a little bit faster. We want to start a company. Again, I went back to my old ways. I started looking at interesting industries. I thought we could go and learn about stuff, buy into it, and maybe that's true. But I think when we created the space, started noticing things, and there were a few things that kept nagging at me, and we learned over the time there. One was Paribus, and I think even our time at Capital One was mostly about turning data into savings at scale. We did it at a large scale independently, but by the time we left, we had were able to generate over 9 figures in savings for customers, and felt we were just scratching the surface of what's possible. We were bought by the credit card division at Capital One, and so we got an upfront seat to see, like, how does the credit card business work? Why is this a great business? How does $1 billion in profit just show up every 3 months? That's cool. At the same time, we saw a lot of, like, weird incentives. So like, for example, our job was to focus on savings, like was the question we were asking day in and day out. And we would ask customers who were curious, like, were you interested in points or cash back? And if you really listened, um, customers would tell you, I actually was looking for more in my bank account. It was an entirely different thing. Meanwhile, we had a lot of really smart colleagues, good people, but sort of their job was sort of to outsmart customers, to get them to spend more money to like earn more points or cash back. And customers trying to outsmart the bank to keep more, and both were kind of losing. The bank was spending more and more on points and rewards. Customers were spending more than they intended to or wanted to, and we had this growing and nagging sense. Actually, so we understand how the business works. What if there was a card and software that help people spend less? People might actually get more of what they actually want and are looking for. And you might, one of the key costs in the business of credit cards is cost of points and rewards. If you could reduce that, but yet help people get more of what they're looking for, maybe you can compete less on price. And so we just got obsessed with this idea of like, this seems crazy. Should we build a card and software that's focused on helping people spend less? And that became, we got obsessed with the idea. After thinking about this for too many months in a row, we started transitioning, made sure things were in a good spot. We left in February of 2019, and in March of 2019 incorporated, and we're here trying to do it. And so we've evolved a lot. I think today is day 982, but yeah, we're just trying to make that reality happen.
So it's been almost 3 years, right? And I remember, okay, so you around March or April when you were raising your seed round, you sent me an email. It was like, "Hey, we're starting another company. Can you invest, or would you like to invest?" I'm very thankful that you reached out to me. It was awesome, and you'd already like, so I was able to invest a very small amount, but it's great. And I didn't really know anything about the company. I think I just said yes, like on the email, sure. Um, and so but then it's been about 3 years, and since then you've raised like $380 million. Is that right? Or $400 million?
Uh,
$300 million.
it's a little bit more, about probably about 475 in equity and another 150 in debt. We've raised a lot.
That's crazy. And most recently at almost $4 billion valuation,
That's
right?
right.
Or so so it's been like a pretty wild ride. Like I remember we've talked a number of times. After after you started ramp, we've kind of like caught up pretty regularly, every couple of months or every 6 months or something. And so it feels like this time it's interesting. I never really thought about it before, but you're kind of like rebuilding Paribus, but for like from a corporate setting in a way. It's like figuring out how to save people money at the corporate scale. And then so you're doing something you have a little bit of experience with, but it feels like you've had like perfect execution, in your startup, in a way. Like it's everything has gone well, and every time I open the investor emails, the graph is up and to the right of like total spend. So like how have you done it? What have you learned from the past that you applied here?
Yeah, I thank you. And I think you're being more coy, very helpful in a lot of different ways, and I'll talk about those. But I think a few things. One, uh, experience is good. But I think first, just have clarity. Where possible, have clarity of purpose of what you're about. Like I think every company has a purpose, and ours is to help companies save their most scarce and important resources, this their time and their shareholders' capital, so they can build better companies. And for us, because we were clear of like we're going to build cards, software, bill payments, finance automation, all in service of that. It made it very easy to say what we were about, drive the company, and sort of drive a common purpose. So even though people locally make decisions and can have a different expression of like what does it mean to make that true, um, helping set a clear foundation for what a company is about even early on, helps you run a lot faster if you know which direction you're heading into. The second, um, I think is like really listening to people. Like I think it's one of the things we learned a lot from you, but it's some people have like great vision and ideas, but don't spend a lot of time talking to customers. Before we shipped a single credit card, put it in anyone's hands, we had talked to I think it was like 150, 200 finance teams, founders, and asked them about how, what they were looking for. And like the market was investing crazy amounts into like fighting people for larger sign-on bonuses, more points and reward structures to get people to spend more. And if you actually started asking people, there was this thing that changed where once companies got to be about 15, 20 people, like it was kind of weird if the founder was still using the points. $500 bonus doesn't matter to them in the way that it used to. And are more trying to be like, I know this has potential. I'm trying to build a well-run business, make sure there's not too much noise. And look, I'm starting to get ripped off by different SaaS vendors. They say contact sales. I contact them to get a higher price than some other person. Could you help us spend less? That's and automate away a lot of these things that I want to think about. And so we listen and actually discovered there was this big hole in the market. Next, in fundraising, like we'd ask, there's this adage: if you ask for money, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get money. We'd ask people like, hey, here's this problem. One, what issue are you encountering in your finance, how you're running your company, but also two, here's what we're trying to solve. People sit on the same side of the table and sort of think about the problem together, and people sort of see themselves in the problem, get excited. And so it's helped remove the barrier of, okay, we have a clarity of purpose. We're listening to customers, have a clear sense of what they're looking for. And so it makes road mapping very much simpler. We ask for advice. People are excited about it. Maybe goes into a roadmap, or they say, I'm excited about this problem. I want to invest behind it. So it removes a common founder trap of fundraising. And then last, all right, you've got clarity of purpose. You're listening. You have a clear roadmap. You have funds. Now what? Just try to grow 10% every week. I think part of now what's helped us, we're processing billions of dollars per year in purchases. I think we've grown like 70% over the past 70 days, even at our scale. It was never around, like, our goal setting is never, we're going to go in 10x, we're going to go and reach some mark far out and let's back into it. It's what can we do over the coming weeks to make a bit of progress and let things compound. And our goals are more local and narrow, and we think that's enough. Constraints are good. So those are the four, I think, things that have been really helpful for me.
So how many people are you right now? Like, how big is your team?
We just crossed 200 people.
Okay, so at 200 people, like, you're still setting goals on a weekly or basis or monthly basis. Like, how are you able? I mean, because the beauty of YC and early stage startups, which is why I think so many founders like them, is like, it's like a few people, maybe 5 or 10 or something like that. And you're working on, you can say, hey, this is what we're going to work on this week. We're just going to focus on growing 10%. I don't know about next week. But at a 200-person scale, you're starting to get into the place where it's a little harder to do that. You have to do a little bit more planning. So how do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think a couple things. One, I think a lot of the building companies, in more of what I work on today is more building of the company than of the product itself. But a lot of the art, like, it's sort of like self-replication, and it's not going to be perfect. You're going to hire different kinds of people with different skill sets, and that's a good thing. But look, I think you're right. At one point, I was 33% of the headcount. Today, I'm about 0.5%. I'm like not as influential or helpful as I used to be. But there's 199 plus other people at Ramp who hopefully are making good decisions. And I think that the reason we try to do is say, like, here's the goal, it's close in scope, is we sort of say, here's what we're going to measure. Let's go and measure. And we have lots of visibility into it. We see the collective output. People have sort of local ways that map up to it. But I think I think the reason for setting closer goals and creating visibility and measuring that constantly is to make sure people feel empowered and excited, and feel like they too can affect the goal. And I think that when people feel like a goal is closer and more immediate, you actually can drive the output that you're hoping to drive. And so I think in some ways the reason we set closer goals is we set the output, we give people the flexibility to structure activities they think will like lay out in that. It's the same sort of question as when we were at YC and you were saying, okay, you're going to grow 10% this week. What are you going to do? Like, we still ask similar sets of questions to people. It's not always expressly like, we're going to grow 10%. What are you going to do this week to grow 10%? It might be, what are you going to do this week to ship and drive some incremental progress? And our goal setting tends to be of like, we look out 3 months at a company, but we ask people these iterative questions. Um, each and every, we still run on biweekly sprints for production. We look at results at the start of every week, and we try to measure it in that way. And so, does that make sense? Is that um,
Yeah. So what has gone poorly for you? Like everything seems like it's gone well from the outside look. What has gone poorly?
um, it's the feeling like when you're inside of a company, there's always things where you're like, we grew a lot, we could have grown a lot faster. We sort of um, kept bumping our head in all these different unnecessary ways, and so um, there's always a lot. I think in companies where you could be doing better. What's gone poorly? I mean, um, I think that there. I think that like in terms of like we're very fast and iterative, and I think quick and like have a lot of learning. I think that there's certain um, I would have hope on certain like long term build outs we'd be further along. Sometimes I think that we localize too close and narrow, um, and like overput like near term goals over like long term outputs. And so that's hard. That's there. I don't think that we've had too many. Like, look, I can say at Paribus we had real crises. Like one day we had 80% of revenue disappear overnight. Like I've definitely encountered problems. Happily, I don't think there's too many things so far, and I'm not, you know,
Knock on wood.
knocking on wood, crossing my fingers and toes. Like we don't really have a lot of issues. So not a whole lot yet, other than I probably don't sleep as much as I should, and at times it can be, um, I think there's a fast pace, and I think at times, um, sometimes just need to call people to say, by the way, I know this was like a lot we're working through, but I care about you. This actually stepping back, this looks great, and I think at times can drive and be harder charging, and sort of need to go and make sure that we like make time and always treat well. But yeah, I think it's just making space for that, and those are things we talk through often and make sure it always feels good and supportive. But yeah, I think um, there isn't a this was the big mistake that we made, and here's why in this case. I know it's probably not a totally satisfying answer.
Oh, it's all right. It's like you're living a charmed life, Eric. I love it. I love to hear it. So, ramp is probably, I mean, I think it doesn't occur to me that there's some sort of like single catastrophic event or something that someone can do or competitors can do to like just, severely derail your path at this point. Maybe there is. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it on the outside. So I'm curious if, you know, in a way, like to me, like the conclusion is foregone. Like this is going to be a very valuable company. You're going to make a shit ton of money off of it. You'll be successful. You'll be like an all-time great founder. So then at that point, like, what do you do? Like, is this like what you're going to do for the rest of your life? Or like, what are you, is there anything you're waiting to do that you're not doing because you're like working building this, incredible startup?
I from your mouth to God, that would be wonderful. I look, I am things have been very. We put in a lot of time. I think things have been great, and in some ways, I'm excited about. I hope this is the last company I ever work on. I want to be working on this for a very very long time. And I think part of why we've been able to grow and execute in this way is it is such a large industry. It is such a large industry, um, that has been so inaccessible for 30 years, 30 plus years. Like there've been no new entrants in a wildly profitable space. Like that's really unusual. And so I think that as much as we've grown, we still are like not even close to 1% of the market. And so I think we can go a long way. And I think a lot of the reason that we can is it's so misaligned. Like it's just crazy to me that the status quo is like the largest players in the space are basically not building new stuff and trying to outsmart their customers. Like that can't be that can't possibly be like where the industry in the long run settles. And so we're hopeful that whether it's us or competitors changes things where financial partners actually owe it to their customers and are working harder to like deliver more to the bottom line. And so I'm really passionate about it. I love it and excited about it. I want to be working on it for a long period of time. I think for me personally, in things that I mean, I think you talk about this at times with other guests. I actually I love catching up with you because I think you sort of remind like there's much more to life. There's a lot more to be doing. I don't know that I'd be building a different building something different. Like I do this so I can go do this. Um, I do think I think it's a question as companies get bigger, it's like, okay, you've built a, small, medium, large business. What's it all for? And probably my really honest stream of consciousness answer is I hope to build something with influence so we can, one, take on and use the business to help make things better for our customers and for people. But look, I think with that, I'd hope to be able to not just get back through the business, but I think support. I've been very lucky. I grew up in a place where there was great education, good environment. There's people who've meant a lot to me and helped me go from a good idea capabilities to like change my life. I'd hope to be able to do the same for others and work with other people building businesses. And I think other people too who are really, I mean, I count this a lot in China, people who are like absolutely super brilliant, who would have nowhere near the economic opportunity that I might have since like, you know, don't have like a fancy like university that, is on the resume or didn't know people with capital, with resources. And so I do want to keep that in mind to try to support amazing people around the world. But I think we have a little bit of way to go to get there. But yeah, it's an important question. I don't think I've answered that one well yet. I need to think about it more.
I've thought about that a little bit. It's like, most of the world's population now has a smartphone. They have the access to something that could educate them, or like give them opportunity. And it's kind of, I thought about for a while, like how could you create like Duolingo is kind of like this, or there's like this app called
Yeah,
Brilliant that helps, that kind of like will teach you, math and science subjects. And, it seems to me that they're just scratching the surface, and there's probably an opportunity out there to build like a, um, kind of individualized education platform like that touches like everybody in the world through a mobile app. You can kind of teach you anything.
I I really think so. And look, I mean, I'm curious too. I know you've been spending more time on probably like another close cousin of fintech and like kind of crypto and Web3 and all. But it strikes me that like something there's something very interesting happening there where like it's I haven't been in this industry as long as you have, but I remember when I went out to YC, it was the first time I lived in Menlo Park, spent time in Mountain View, and at the end of the summer, we were like, we want to move back to New York, and you're like, okay, like, and other people, like, it was just like a kind of a crazy decision. Like it was not it probably wasn't the odds-on decision to make in summer 2015. Left we came and did what we did, and we're fortunate in a lot of ways. But like innovation was very tied to like places, in moments in time in these scenes, and it was very physical and local. It strikes me as like that's actually for the first time ever. Maybe it's caused the pandemic. I'm not the only person to say this, but like it's not just happening in the Valley. It's not just happening in New York. It's actually happening online in the crypto industry. Like I think that'll be true. Like I mean, I'm curious. Like how do you think about that? Um, you invest in a lot of companies. Like how is that even changing actively? If you were to pull that out a bit more.
Yeah, I think innovation has been unlocked globally in a way that there were already global hubs of innovation, but has in a way that it's never happened before. Like Y-Combinator is a great example where I think the pandemic is the best thing ever to happen to YC, because previously, if you want to start an international company, or like you guys were in New York, right? So to go to YC, you had to say, okay, I'm going to move to this other place for 3 months. And for the international companies, they're coming from Africa or India or Indonesia, and then they're flying back to their market like once a month or something like that. And so it's a pretty big ask. And now it's all virtual. And so you're participating in this virtual cohort over, every week, multiple times a week. And it makes it so much easier of a decision to say, oh, I want to participate in YC because it's going to help me fundraise, help me get that right DNA when I start my company. And I think that like instead of just being for the companies that are willing to come to Silicon Valley, now it's for like every company in the world, right? And that's like a one example of how kind of innovation has unlocked everywhere. So these companies are like much more global than ever, like and all over different places, right? There's YC. I talked to a YC company that was like in Utah, and there's one, they're all over America, they're all over the world, right? And so um, I think the same is that's here to stay, right? Like if you look at the investors, I do all my investor meetings on Zoom, and people keep saying like, oh, you don't get the same signal, but maybe that's true. It's probably true, but you get like 90% of the signal. And like for the trade-off of being able to talk to twice as many or three times as many companies, because I can do it all from like one location. There's no transit time in between, even like locally within like a city. It's just much more effective, and so what that has meant is like there's not
Hmm.
really that much advantage to being in the city I'm in to raise money from me, like being in San Francisco or LA or wherever I'm at. It's not, there's no advantage. So if you're, calling me from, somewhere else, like it's totally fine. Right. And we've made investments all over the country and all over the world, really.
Super cool. That's super cool.
Yeah. And I think that's here to stay. It's like too good for investors. I think the education, like the top of funnel component is still,
Yeah.
that needs to be improved, right? There's um, I guess Y Combinator like that, but even before Y Combinator, right? Like uh, I mean, it's kind of there, like, and there's a lot of like resource online for people to learn, but I think that there's like an element that's missing. That's like the giving people, making learning fun for people and like creating motivation for learning. That's kind of maybe more like fundamental. It's like kind of something you probably have it exposure to in elementary school when you start. Like, how do you create supplementary experiences to that in a digital way? I think is really interesting and could unlock a lot of potential in the human race.
I agree. I think even too, about the like leaving my job. And one of the things that made it so hard, and so weird was like at my, so I worked in banking, and for anyone who worked in it kind of knows it, but it's like success was basically like how many hours did you work, how many hours did your boss see you work, and hopefully it was close to 90 to 100 hours, and it'd be great. You get paid a nice bonus and keep doing it, and stay into it. And um, started there, left, and I first thing I did that, and I think we were trying to grow a little bit, and like my initially I like growing a certain amount was like adding, I don't know, 50 users over a week, and I spent 100 hours doing it, and I think we came up with like 40, and I felt like really awful, uh uh because it's like sort of screwed up and missed like the main thing. And how could we do that? And Kareem got really frustrated. He just was like, whatever. He went on Reddit, and he made like a post, and uh we had 500 signups within um like 5 hours. I just sat there. I was like, wow, like effort didn't correlate at all to the outcome. And so, all right, well, price experimentation, a lot of other things happened, whatever. But I think that the bigger part of it for me was like most of, I think the way education works in most upbringings is like, here's the material, here's the curriculum, here's the test, learn the test, study for it, and you can get an A. And there's positive reinforcement, and it's tracked. And people sort of jobs are kind of like that. And like it's sort of there's people who are trying to figure out, and there's experimentation in the industry. But for most work, like from education to work in kind of the traditional way of doing it, it's so long as you do exactly what someone asks you to do, that is success. And the weird part is reality is not like that. There's no rubric or standard way to do that. And so, I mean, I almost wonder for anyone working on that, like, how do you break down that problem of like, while still teaching people, trying to even teach the notion of like, you actually don't want to follow like if you follow the standard, um, track too much and are too oriented on like getting positive reinforcement, you, you, you you're never going to be independent enough to like go and innovate. So I, I mean, how do you think about it? Like, how would you address that if you were, it feels like a big missing part for me.
Teaching people.
Yeah. Teaching people like,
Yeah, I don't know how to teach that to.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like I don't know how to teach that to people. I think that that's something that there's a lot of like personality driven attraction for the people who become entrepreneurs. But I think about that a lot in my current state. Like as somebody who's almost 40, like it's very easy for you to get caught in like the habit grooves of whatever's like working for you. And so I spend a lot of my time thinking about like how do I break out of my existing context and learn something new or experience something new or see something through like a different set of lenses. And so I don't know, I'm just like always interested in things that shift my perspective or like show me like a new perspective or get me outside my comfort zone, especially. So
well, let me ask you a different question.
that could be like, yeah.
How do you think you're going to, you have, a kid in the house and raising family, like how are you thinking about even education for your son? And approaching like these sorts of questions, like where's your head at currently? More to genuine curiosity.
Yeah, I think it's like for me, I think mostly about modeling, like what kind of behavior and values do I want to model?
Mm,
Because I think it's like if I look at my brothers and myself, we have a lot of behaviors and values that were modeled by our parents. And it's not that far from those things. Maybe there's some that's like from our peers, right? When we were growing up. So it's like there's a little bit of like, who do you want your kid to be around? But it's a lot of like, what are the behaviors and values that you model? And so for me, there's a lot of, things I care about are like curiosity and kindness. And um, so just making sure that I like am living those values in front of my kid is like I think that's the more than any like active thing, like, oh, I'm gonna do like this kind of education or like, this kind of preschool or anything like that. That I just think about those things as the primary ways that it will like pick up behaviors.
that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, actually. Yeah. Um, all right. Well, any final thoughts about your journey or things you imparted wisdom you'd love to share with the audience?
I no, this is fun. I mean, look, probably as you can tell, I know we wandered a little bit more towards the end, but like I
No, that's great. I love it.
I think this is really I feel really lucky and happy and like there's a lot of moments that are I mean at some level I think we're certainly still trying to figure different pieces out. I think there's a couple of different foundational pieces that have been great for us, like get the foundation right, listen, try to get like ask for advice, get people on the team and sort of take an approach. And I think it's like been a lot of little things that have helped compound quickly. I'm sure we'll run into our share of issues over the coming months. So happy to report back, and I'd love to get your advice as those things come up. But look, I just think there's I mean, I'm very excited and hopeful for just a generation of businesses and frankly people where I think given the changes in way people can both build businesses, interact, exchange value with customers and grow, I think businesses can really transform from like a mechanism of extracting value, like creating something, extracting value and sort of moving to like I love businesses and I think Ramp is sort of one where as you scale it, if you actually might be able to design where the better your customers do, the better you do. And I think trying to build aligned business models really helps. It speeds up the pitch. It speeds up orientation. It means that your team isn't building stuff that you look at it and you're like, I don't know about that, and I need to contort to align incentives. So if you get that right early, it constrains a lot of the problem set to make the rest easier. But no, we're having fun, but long way to go. So,
How do you prevent yourself from becoming like as a business? I think most businesses start that way, right? Where they're creating something that's, value accretive to the customer. And then eventually, oftentimes they've grown into the market. They have this dominant position. They try to figure out, they flip mindset into like, okay, let's be as extractive as possible. And like, how do you think about preventing ramp from, forestalling that moment for as long as possible?
Yeah. Um, I think it's a couple things. I mean, one, um, first, like I think in some ways companies are just very like missions matter. Like people self-replicate. And I think even in an organization, one of the more important parts early on is like you have mission, you have values, you have principles. And the reason is not to have like highfalutin, nice sounding statements if you go do this. It's like hopefully it could be a good rubric for people can like actually point and say this is what we agreed on commonly. And hopefully it can be instructive in helping people do the right thing. And I think in some ways as companies grow, you have more employees, the more people who've known and you've built that culture. Hopefully it actually serves as a guide. And so I would say even to people just starting, like that stuff actually is really important. And it's important to think about it often. And if it resonates with you, say it often. So later, when people actually do have the real incentive to do it, you go back to like, but it's so, I think even in education and character, the other things you were talking about, like it becomes character, it becomes like a moral compass and belief. And we certainly hope that, you know, with the mission that's very clear around serving customers, about saving them time and money, always and putting that first. That will be the North Star and override. And look, I think we have a long way to go, and I think we can drive that for a long time. Um, I think that as you start to get to scale, like I think you need to periodically look at your business model. For us right now, it's very easy. It's interchange. People, we focus a lot on products, things that people will use, and the output of that is people use the card and our financial products more. We're starting to now get into areas where it's not we're offering the fastest growing corporate card in America, expense management, which is traditionally people pay for concurrent expensify. It's free. You can replace them for free on Ramp. Reimbursements, same thing. Bill payments, Bill.com is a $35 billion company. Accounting automation, all these sets of things traditionally are paid progress. And so we've sort of taken the approach of let's just do more and more stuff for free, have the flywheel go faster, like a better and better reasons. There's more value for people to sign up to make it easier. I think later on, like something we think about is like, let's say actually the majority of how people move money is bill payments. And there's some people only want to use that set of software, but they don't want to use the way the company makes money today, which is credit cards. I think the outcome is like we need to actually be deliberate and think about like where are we making money and does that align? And if not, it's probably like incentives work, people do what they're incentivized to do. So there's that. Like, can you go upstream and relook at the mission and vision and values? Can you look at what incentives are we actually putting into place and is our business model aligned? And I guess what I would say is I would hope that at that point things get out of whack, you'd actually look at changing the underlying, making sure the underlying business model is consistent with that. And so I feel like in some ways, still today, it feels a little academic. We're a few years away, but I think you're right. I hope with any luck, we will have this problem and we'll make sure we get it right. I don't know.
Amazing. Eric, one thing a closing thought I had for you was the one thing I love about you is that every time I talk to you, no matter what's going on, you're so positive and excited. Like, I feel like you're just living your best life. Yeah, it took me a long time to get there, but like I felt like you've been doing that since the early days of the first startup, which weren't as smooth as Ramp, and it's pretty amazing to see.
I, Justin means a lot. And look, I definitely feel very lucky someday. Like, look, like anybody, like uh, good days, bad days, different issues, ways where I wish I could do better. And there's always more to do. But I look back and I guess what I'd say is in a lot of ways I feel very charmed and happy and fortunate. And I think you've been. I think it's actually been very good. You talking about like you're on the Quest and other places, but I think a lot of times in an industry where your job is to constantly measure, it's easy to get very negative and sort of celebrate good moments. I try to, and the other's probably more pragmatic. Like I when I find myself kind of beating myself up and getting a little bit too negative, um, sort of ask like, okay, like I'm super stressed. Do I make better decisions when I'm like super stressed out and upset? And I kind of look at the track record, and usually it's like probably not. Extremely rare. I'm like, okay, well, try to have like an active internal dialogue. It's like, given that, calm down, let's chill. How do we do stuff objectively? So I don't know. I would say definitely not perfect. I like anybody have my own stuff to work on, but trying to periodically bring it back, chill and enjoy has been really good. And I feel really lucky. I have one life as far as I know. Uh, try to live your best and enjoy it. And no, it's been a good time and lucky to have friends like you, Justin, to be building this company along the way.
Love that message. Awesome, Eric. Well, thanks for joining, and I'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Thanks, Justin.
All right.